Part 1. The Crossroads of 1812, a world hanging by a thread. In 1812, Napoleon stood at the edge of destiny. His Grande army was the largest Europe had ever seen, a force designed to crush empires. But what if, instead of ashes and frozen corpses, he returned to Paris with the keys to Moscow and the world? The brink of triumph and disaster, June 1812. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, master of Europe, stares east. His grand army, 600,000 men from every corner of his empire, a kaleidoscope of languages and uniforms, crosses the Niemen River. Their target, Russia. Their goal, to force Tsar Alexander I to kneel. But history remembers this campaign not for its ambition, but for its hubris. Endless columns of soldiers, supply wagons groaning under the weight of French wine and Polish grain. Yet within weeks, the cracks show. The Russian scorched earth strategy leaves Napoleon's army starving. Horses collapse. Men desert. By September, when the French finally reach Borodino, the bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars claims 70,000 lives. The Russians retreat but leave Moscow burning. Now the infamous winter arrives. Temperatures plunge to 30 degrees Celsius. Soldiers huddle around fires fueled by broken muskets. Frostbite turns fingers black. Of the 600,000 who marched east, fewer than 20,000 stagger back. Napoleon's aura of invincibility shatters. Europe smells blood. But wait, let's freeze this moment, literally at Moscow's gates. What if the unthinkable happened? What if Napoleon didn't just take Moscow but kept it? A single decision that could have rewritten winter's script. Here's the twist. Napoleon's fatal flaw wasn't invading Russia, it was staying in Moscow. For 35 days, he waited in the Kremlin, expecting Tsar Alexander to surrender. But the Tsar, holed up in St. Petersburg, never blinked. Meanwhile, General Kutuzov's army lurked nearby, harassing French supply lines. But what if Kutuzov had blinked? What if the Russian nobility, terrified of losing their capital, pressured Alexander to negotiate? Imagine Napoleon heeding his marshal's pleas to abandon Moscow early, retreat to Smolensk, and fortify for winter. No endless march home through snowdrifts. No frozen corpses littering the roads. Instead, a disciplined withdrawal, preserving his army's core. Now the dominoes tilt. With his army intact, Napoleon could have forced a treaty. Alexander, isolated and desperate, might have agreed to rejoin the continental system, surrendering grain and ports to strangle Britain. Napoleon returns to Paris not as a broken man, but as a conqueror who tamed the Russian bear. But here's the catch. Victory demands more than battles. It demands restraint. Could Napoleon, the man who once said, "Impossible is not French," resist the siren song of total domination? Or would a single triumph in Russia only fuel his hunger for more? So, in this alternative history, Napoleon does not make a mistake. He retreats to Smolensk. He preserves the core of the army. He forces Alexander I to sign a peace treaty. The Moscow Treaty is signed. Russia bends. Napoleon's continental system, a blockade meant to suffocate Britain, now stretches from Lisbon to Siberia. No British cloth reaches Europe. No Russian wheat feeds London. The Royal Navy's dominance means little if its economy starves. But the real shockwaves ripple across diplomacy. Without Russia's defiance, there's no Sixth Coalition. Prussia and Austria, cowed by Napoleon's Russian victory, remain vassals. No Leipzig, no Battle of Nations, no exile to Elba. Yet history whispers warnings. The Treaty of Moscow would have been a Faustian bargain. To control Russia, Napoleon would need to occupy it, a task far harder than defeating it. Picture French garrisons in Kiev, Cossack revolts in the steppes, and aristocratic plots in St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, the continental system chokes Europe's economies. Silk weavers in Lyon go bankrupt. German peasants riot over bread prices. And what of Napoleon himself? A man who thrived on crisis now rules a stagnant empire. Victory in Russia wouldn't end Napoleon's hunger. It would ignite a new, darker ambition. With Russia subdued, Napoleon's empire stretches from Lisbon to Siberia. But empires aren't built on maps. They're forged in fire. And this fire would burn unpredictably. Ever wondered how different historical events could have unfolded and what the world might look like today because of those alternative events? Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on fascinating new videos exploring alternative history. Write in the comments your vision of this alternative history, as well as offer your options for other events that we will definitely consider. Part 2. The Domino Effect. A French century, Napoleon's victory in Russia sends shockwaves. Prussia and Austria, already trembling vassals, are shackled tighter to the continental system. Their armies disbanded, their kings reduced to puppet rulers, signing decrees drafted in Paris. Britain, now isolated, faces a Franco-Russian colossus spanning 2 continents. But here's the question. Could the Royal Navy alone defy this continental leviathan? Imagine it. No Russian grain sails to London. No Baltic timber repairs Nelson's fleet. The British economy suffocates. Yet Britain's secret weapon? Time. Napoleon's empire is vast, but brittle. The unseen costs. The empire's cracks begin to show. Napoleon's troops soon learn a grim lesson. Occupying Russia is like gripping water. In the Urals, guerrilla bands ambush supply trains. Cossack horsemen vanish into blizzards, reappearing to slit French throats. Every village becomes a potential Vendée, a reference to the royalist uprising in France that drowned in blood. Even worse, the numbers. To garrison Russia, Napoleon drains France. Conscription quotas soar. By 1815, 1 in 3 Frenchmen aged 20-25 wears a uniform. Fields lie fallow. Workshops close. And in Paris, the mood darkens. Would bread riots topple the emperor faster than any coalition? Economic strain. The gold that buys nothing. The continental system, designed to bankrupt Britain, now bleeds France. Russian grain rots in Baltic ports, forbidden from export. French merchants starve for markets. Worse, Napoleon's solution? Print money. Assignats, the revolutionary currency, return and hyperinflation follows. A loaf of bread costs a week's wages. The Paris Stock Exchange crashes. Yet Napoleon, ever the gambler, doubles down. He seizes the Bank of France, demands loans from conquered states. Prussia's treasury is emptied. Austria's silver mines seized. But gold can't buy loyalty or bread. Colonial shifts, the scramble begins early. With Europe subdued, France tightens its grip on the Mediterranean. Algeria falls decades early. Malta becomes a French naval base. Britain, desperate for resources, turns south. Imagine redcoats marching into Cape Town in 1820, not 1900. The scramble for Africa begins 60 years early, a race fueled by European desperation. But colonies cost blood and treasure. Revolts in North Africa drain French troops. But what happens next? How could these events have prevented the First World War? It's all in the next installments of the Napoleon series. In the meantime, what do you think would have happened next?